Welcome back to Star Wars. It's been a couple of weeks. I had a couple of Mondays that I just could not fit in the reading. So that's unfortunate, but it is how life goes sometimes. So we're going to get into it and do a couple of chapters tonight. We're in the latter half of the book. We're on chapter 24 out of 33. So if I keep up and I actually am able to do this every Monday, we'll finish out the book in four more readings after tonight, which I know is dragging it out for a lot of you. A lot of you could read this book in a night, but that's what I'm able to do, so that's what we're doing. All right, jump on into it here. So, chapter 24. Theron had no idea what Nosteral was planning, but he knew he had to get on the Ascendant Spear quickly. Instead of heading back to the Golden Galley, where he might hope to steal a boarding pass, he headed for the hangar where the ship had docked. The scene was one of chaos. Hundreds of crew members milled around the hangar, clearly agitated. 6 guards stood with weapons drawn, lined up at the base of each of the half-dozen ramps leading into the ship, blocking the way. Theron slipped into the crowd, studying the guards. He quickly realized they weren't allowing anyone to leave the vessel. Anyone trying to board was subject to a lengthy interrogation and inspection of their ID before being allowed to pass. The delay was causing a steady increase in the crowd, waiting impatiently to be allowed back on. Whatever Nosteral had done had caused security to clamp down hard. "What's going on?" Theron asked a tall woman beside him. "Your guess is as good as mine," she answered, clearly annoyed and not entirely sober. "I just want to get back to my bunk." There were angry murmurs in the crowd, and a handful of people actually pushed through to verbally confront the guards at the base of the boarding ramps, something that would never have happened a year ago. Imperial citizens were raised in a military culture that trained them to respect authority, but the traditional discipline of the Imperial troops had been frayed by their recent setbacks in the war, and with hundreds of tired and drunk crew members coming back from R&R, tempers were high. An idea struck Theron. It was crazy, impulsive, and risky. In other words, just his style. He worked his way through the crowd, heading out of the hangar and back into Reaver Station. He remembered passing by a small security post, a room where the soldiers responsible for inspecting the incoming vessels could pass the time while they waited for arrivals. With Sea-Wing shut down to other traffic because of the Spear's presence, the guard post was unstaffed. Theron paused at the door, glancing around quickly, and made sure nobody in the crowd of people passing by was paying any attention to him. They were too wrapped up in their own thoughts and conversations, or focused on meeting up with friends to enjoy their brief time on the station away from whatever vessel they served on. He pulled the slicer spike from his pocket, concealing it in his palm as he clipped it into the access panel on the wall. He was careful to stand straight and tall, his shoulders back and his head held high as he quickly sliced through the locked door. Hunching over and other furtive behavior would draw far more attention from the people walking by than someone who clearly looked like he had every right to be there. The door slid open and Theron stepped confidently into the small room beyond before closing it behind him. The guard post was crowded. 4 chairs packed in around a large control console with vid screens displaying the various hangars across the station. Empty, pending arrival, security check in progress, cleared to board. Every hangar in Sea-Wing was set to the same status, inactive, because hangar security needed to know the number and size of incoming vessels so they could properly handle inspections. The guard post had access to Reaver Station's external scanners and the early warning beacons. The beacons were the first line of defense, strategically placed to detect incoming vessels long before they actually reached Reaver Station. It didn't take long for Theron to slice into the system. The scanners currently showed a few dozen Imperial vessels in the sector, arriving, departing, or waiting for clearance from the central tower to land. He quickly verified that Tethys was gone. The status display of the hangar where they had docked now read empty. Satisfied, he made a small adjustment to one of the settings on his slicer spike, then began to feed a steady stream of false data into the system. Several dozen vessels, ranging in size from single pilot fighters all the way up to full capital ships, suddenly materialized on the scanners, popping into existence near the early warning beacons. The data mimicked the effect of a large, well coordinated fleet dropping from hyperspace all at once on the farthest edges of the sector. A few seconds later, alarms began to ring out through Reaver Station, warning of the simulated Republic attack. The sizzle and hum of clashing blades echoed off the walls of the cavernous chamber as Karad's apprentices engaged Nosteral. Their attacks were basic variations on the Makashi style, a precise and economical lightsaber form designed for maximum results with minimal movement by stressing jabs and thrusts. Their skills were raw. Like Karad, much of their training had focused on developing the unique abilities required to help their master command the Ascendant Spear. They were still able to call on the fury of the dark side to move with astonishing strength and speed, but they hadn't mastered the subtle art of allowing the Force to guide their blades. They were wielding the weapon instead of allowing it to become an extension of themselves. Nevertheless, they were relentless in their attacks, and there were two of them. Nosteral was forced onto the defensive to ward off their attacks, occasionally slipping in quick maneuvers drawn from the more aggressive Ataru form to keep them off balance. Darth Karad merely observed the battle at first, keeping a safe distance from the deadly blade of her former master, while his focus and energies were drained by her apprentices. Realizing he would eventually wear down if he allowed the battle to become a duel of attrition, the Keldor countered with Gem-So, the fifth of the 7 recognized lightsaber forms, concentrating his counterattacks exclusively on the physically smaller female Sith. He unleashed a series of savage blows, driving her into a stumbling retreat. For an instant, he was left completely exposed to her human companion, but the unexpected ferocity of the Nosteral's sudden switch in tactics caught him unprepared. He hesitated a fraction of a second before thrusting forward, giving the Jedi enough time to leap aside, even as his Sith opponent tripped over her own backpedaling feet and fell to the floor. Nosteral lunged forward to deliver a coup de grace, but his momentum was suddenly reversed, and he found himself sailing backward as Darth Karad hit him with a powerful force push. He was able to roll into a back somersault as he hit the ground and spring back to his feet, but his brief advantage was lost. The two apprentices closed on him again, cutting him off before he could even think about charging toward Karad. As they approached, he sensed the Imperial reinforcements in the hall outside, scrambling to restore power to the sealed door so they could join the fray. Knowing he was running out of time, Nosteral switched tactics again. He thrust out with a powerful force wave, sweeping them both off their feet. But before he could finish off his prone opponents, Karad unleashed a blast of crackling dark side energy in his direction. Nosteral leapt clear, the deadly blue lightning scorching the floor where he had been standing an instant before. He threw his lightsaber in Karad's direction, sending it end over end on a direct line with his target. The Faline parried the attack with her own blade, though she was forced to retreat a step to absorb the impact. Nosteral was already in motion, charging past her apprentices before they could scramble to their feet. His lightsaber flew back into his outstretched hand as he fell on Karad. He had trained her in Niman, the sixth and most balanced form of lightsaber combat. Malgus might have taught her other styles, but faced with Nosteral's furious assault, she instinctively fell back into the one she had learned before all others. Niman lent itself well to the Jedi ways, eschewing naked aggression for balance and economy of movement that... Oh, we're in an ad. Oh well, I'm going to keep going. Balance and economy of movement that relied on focus and precision. As a Sith Lord who drew her strength from channeling the raw emotional fury of the dark side, the style compromised Karad's abilities. The effect was minimal, but it was more than enough for Nosteral to exploit. He used a quick shove with the force to send her off balance and brought his lightsaber in high to strike at her shoulder. When she raised her own blade to block the blow, he dropped low and took her feet out from under her with a sweep of his leg. Carad toppled over, but the Jedi was forced to turn his back on her to engage the female Sith as she leapt to Carad's aid. They exchanged a quick series of blows, plenty of time for Carad to regain her feet. Instead of attempting to finish Nostaral off by attacking from his flank, however, she retreated from the melee, putting the preservation of her own life above the opportunity to finish off her opponent. The male apprentice joined in a second later, and Nostaral switched to the defensive Ceresu form. He could sense fatigue seeping into his muscles. The toll of the battle was wearing him down, fractionally slowing his blade and leaving him more vulnerable to the force attacks of his enemies. An instant later, the door whooshed open, and a dozen Imperial guards spilled into the room. Carad held up a hand to indicate they should hold their fire. "The outcome is inevitable," Carad called out to him as he fought off the twin attacks of her apprentices. "I sense your exhaustion. Throw down your weapon and I will let you beg for mercy." Nostaral hadn't expected to win the battle. From the moment he decided to board the Ascendant Spear, he'd known defeating Carad was a near impossibility. But he wasn't about to surrender and grovel at her feet, if for no other reason than that if he did, she would be suspicious and his true plan would never work. "I didn't come here seeking victory," he said. Carad's head tilted to the side as she searched for the meaning behind his words. Failing to grasp it, she turned on the soldiers arrayed just inside the door. "I want him alive," she told the captain. Nostaral used the last of his dwindling strength to call on the force for a final desperate leap that sent him hurtling over the apprentices' heads toward his former Padawan. The attack was doomed to failure. There were a dozen ways Carad could have avoided or repelled the attack, but she didn't even have to react, as the soldiers opened fire with a dozen blasters all set to stun. The bolts knocked the Jedi from the air and sent him slamming hard to the ground. His lightsaber fell from his paralyzed fingers, the blade extinguished as the hilt clattered to the floor. As he lay there face down, struggling to cling to consciousness, Carad strode over and picked up his lightsaber, tucking it into her belt like a hunter claiming a trophy from a prized kill. She rolled him over onto his back with her boot, then crouched down to peer into his masked face. You knew you couldn't win this battle," she said, "so why did you really come here?" Nostaral had no intention of answering her question, but even if he had, his voice would have been drowned out by the sounds of an alarm ringing through the ship. Carad snapped her head in the direction of the guard captain, who was listening intently to a message coming over the receiver in his ear. "Reaver Station is under attack," he blurted. "A Republic fleet has been detected in the sector. ETA 16 minutes. "Activate our shields," Carad answered, concerned but not panicked. "Recall all crew to their posts. We leave dock in 12 minutes. Excuse me. That came out of nowhere. Anyone not on board will be left behind and face a full court-martial." As the captain relayed her commands to the person on the other side of the transmission, Carad turned back to look down at Nostaral. "Was this your plan? Sacrifice yourself so the Republic could catch us in port and unprepared? Or is there more to your scheme?" Nostaral stayed silent, the edges of his vision growing dim as the blackness closed in, the blaring alarms growing fainter and more distant. Just before he finally lost consciousness, he heard Carad say, "This is another battle you cannot win. The Imperial interrogators will make you tell me everything." Reaver Station was in chaos. The alarms echoing through the station were quickly matched by alarms from every ship docked in the hangars as the central tower spread word of the Republic fleet closing in. Men and women sprinted back to their vessels, scrambling to get to their battle stations before the enemy arrived. Theron didn't know how long it would take for his ruse to be discovered, but he knew he had to act fast. He ran from the guard post, joining the stampede of soldiers bearing down on the hangar where the Ascendant spear was docked. As he burst into the bay, he was swept up in the crowd and carried toward the ramps. The guards keeping the crew from boarding the ship were gone, either recalled onto the spear or overwhelmed by the sudden crush of people scrambling to get to their posts. Theron continued to let the crowd carry him along, heading up the ramp and into the vessel. Once aboard, the crowd thinned quickly as people broke off in different directions, heading to their assigned stations. Theron did his best to look like he knew where he was going, though in truth he had no idea. He'd only had time to plan out how he'd get himself on the ship. Now that he was aboard, he needed to figure out something new, and it was hard to concentrate due to the incessant clang of the spear's warning klaxon. It wasn't unheard of for new crew members to get lost when first assigned to a ship as large as the Ascendant Spear, and there were diagrams of the ship's basic layout posted at several places along the bulkheads. He stopped to check one, quickly memorizing the layout before choosing his destination. He needed somewhere with access to the ship's main system so he could slice in and plant the virus, but it had to be isolated enough for him to work in private. His eyes fell on the engine room near the rear of the ship, separated from the rest of the vessel by a heavily shielded bulkhead to guard against explosions and radioactive discharges. It was accessible only through a single maintenance hatch. Moving with a new sense of purpose, he worked his way through the ship toward the turbolift leading down to the vessel's lowest level. He encountered fewer and fewer people as he went, and by the time he reached the lift, he was alone. Before he could press the button to call it, the doors slid open to reveal a short, heavy-set woman in a major's uniform. "Corporal," she snapped on seeing Theron waiting for the elevator. "Where do you think you're going?" "Sorry, sir," Theron said, slurring his words and snapping off a sloppy salute. He squinted, one eye closed as he swayed unsteadily on his feet. "Gotta get to my post." "This lift is reserved," she barked, her voice even louder than the incessant alarms. "Authorized personnel only." "Alarms woke me up," Theron mumbled. "Gotta get the engineering." "You're drunk," she spat, her voice filled with disgust. "Are you scheduled for duty?" "Oh, 900, he replied. "That's not for another 6 hours," she said with an exasperated shake of her head. "Go back and sleep it off in your bunk." "Sure thing, sure," Theron said, fumbling out another clumsy salute. He turned and staggered off in the opposite direction, down the corridor and around the corner. Once he was out of sight, he dropped the act and moved quickly down the passage, taking a series of twists and turns that eventually doubled him back to the turbolift. Peering around the corner, he made sure the Major was gone before making a dash for the lift. He waited impatiently for the doors to open, then slipped inside and punched a button for G-Deck, hoping he wouldn't run into anyone else. Luck was with him. He didn't see anybody as he made his way from the elevator to the engine room's access hatch. Unlike the automated doors controlled by access panels, this was an old Durasteel hinge model, opened by turning a heavy wheel in the center of the hatch. The wheel was stiff but from lack of use, and despite his best efforts, Theron couldn't budge it. He realized the maintenance crew probably used a wrench to gain the necessary leverage, but all he had was his pistol. He looked around the empty corridor, trying to find something else he could use. Seeing nothing, he shrugged and pulled the blaster from the holster on his hip, jamming it into the spokes of the door's wheel. Grabbing the pistol's grip with one hand and the barrel with the other, he pulled for all he was worth. The veins on his neck bulged as his muscles strained. Just as he thought he was about to pass out from the effort, the wheel let loose with a groan and moved a quarter turn. Theron adjusted his grip on the pistol and pulled again. The wheel moved more easily this time, another quarter turn. He re-gripped for a third time and pulled. The wheel completed its revolution and the door popped open with a loud clang. Standing motionless, he waited to see if anyone would respond to the noise, but all he heard was the clanging alarm. When he removed the pistol from the spokes of the wheel, he noticed the barrel had been bent. The weapon was useless. Out of habit, he slapped it into his leg holster, then stepped in through the hatch. Pulling the heavy Durasteel door closed behind him, he turned the wheel on the inside a quarter turn. enough to keep the hatch from popping open, but not so far he'd have to struggle to open it when he was ready to get out. He was standing on a narrow metal walkway that ran the full 40-meter length of the engine room. To his left was a reinforced bulkhead, to his right the Spear's massive hyperdrive and the enormous ion engines that propelled the ship when it moved at sublight speeds. The walls and ceiling were covered with a maze of pipes, tubes, cords, and wires running among hundreds of seemingly randomly placed electrical boxes, fuse panels, and computer chip relays. In addition to the alarms, he could still hear and feel through the vibrations in the walkway. There was a steady, low-pitched hum coming from the ion engines. The air in the engine room was 20 degrees warmer than the corridor he had just come in from, and it smelled of ozone and burning plastic. If the heat doesn't make me pass out, the fumes just might. There were no control panels down here in the bowels of the ship, but Theron knew he could slice the spear by tapping directly into the main system. All he had to do was figure out which of the hundreds of wires and relays connected the engine room to the primary command console on the bridge. Shouldn't take more than a few hours, right? To his relief, the clanging alarms finally stopped. The blessed silence was broken by two long blasts from a distant horn, and the ground shifted under his feet as the Ascendant Spear disengaged from Reaver Station. Guess you're not leaving any time soon, he thought. Might as well get to work. And that is the end of chapter 24. So we'll jump right on into 25. The Imperial Shuttle's 10-hour journey from Reaver Station back to Jagani Port gave Tethys plenty of time to think about her deal with Theron. She wasn't entirely sure what had happened, but the basic details were clear. Theron and the weird-looking Jedi were trying something crazy and foolish, and if she didn't deliver her message to Grandmaster Satil Shan, a lot of people were going to die. She tried to tell herself she didn't really care what happened to a bunch of people she'd never met, but during the long flight her mind kept conjuring up images of orbital cities in ruins, the bodies of men, women, and children scattered among the wreckage. She'd seen plenty of pictures of death and destruction on the holovids and never given them a second thought, but this was different. Those people were already dead. There was no point worrying about them. The ones on Duro were still alive. No profit for us in letting them die, she thought, reminding herself why she was really doing this. Theron had promised her a big fat payday when this was all over, and it wasn't like she was taking any real risk. Agreeing to the job had actually gotten her off Reaver Station before the Jedi and Theron pulled off whatever crazy stunt they were planning. Only risk is if Theron doesn't make it, she thought. She realized the thought of him dying on Reaver Station actually bothered her more than thinking of all the nameless victims on Duro. Try as she might, she couldn't convince herself it was entirely because he wouldn't be able to pay her. She slept for a few hours, letting the shuttle's autopilot navigate through hyperspace. She dreamed of Nagani Zhou, the crazy old Jedi who'd thrown himself in front of a blaster bolt meant for her, sacrificing his life for her own. But she didn't dream of their own but she didn't dream of their time together or his death. In her dreams, it was like the old man had never left. And I guess this is a memory. It goes all into italics. Tethys was on the Imperial shuttle, heading back to Jagani Port. Nagani Zhou was sitting in the seat beside her. His scraggly gray hair and bushy eyebrows were wild and disheveled. Looking at him, it wouldn't be hard to imagine he had never owned a comb in his life. He wore an old Jedi robe, wrinkled and stained with the hood thrown back. There were several charred holes in his chest where the blasters had ripped through him, but his blue eyes were sharp and bright. "I expected better from you, Tethys," he said. "You think I gave my life up just so you could keep on working for the Black Sun? Work for old Tyan Brotherhood now. That's not the point. Big things ahead for us. At least we agree on that. Why did you save us?" And then it ends the memory, I guess. A beep from the dream, a beep from the autopilot alerting her that they were preparing to drop out of hyperspace startled her awake before the man in her dream could give her an answer. Stupid Jedi, Tethys muttered as she switched the shuttle over to manual control. She dropped from hyperspace in the DeSevero system, charted a course for the shuttle to bring her into Jigani port, then opened a holochannel. "Welcome back, Sunshine," Gorvich said once the holo was connected. "Quick turnaround. I guess everything must have gone real smooth." "Not smooth. Left Jedi and Theron at Reaver Station." Gorvich chuckled. "Sound like a good story. Lay it on me." "Not over comm channels. Meet us at Jedi's fancy shuttle. You move it?" "Nah, it's still in the hangar at Jigani Port." "How long till you get there?" 30 minutes, she said, flicking off the holo, so she wouldn't have to deal with Gorvich for 1 second longer than absolutely necessary. By the time she arrived at the hangar where the Prosperity was parked, Gorvich was already waiting for her. "Okay, Sunshine, we're here, so what's the deal? Why'd you ditch the others?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. She wanted to tell Gorvich as little about what had happened as possible. If he knew Theron had offered her 10,000 credits, he'd want a cut. "Didn't ditch them. Told us to go. Need us to deliver a message." "I don't follow," Gorvich said, scratching his head. "You going back to pick them up later?" "Not part of the plan." "So how are you going to get off? They're going to get off Reaver Station?" Tethys shrugged. "Never told us. Just said, take shuttle, go deliver message." Gorvich shook his head. "I knew they were up to something funny. This won't come back later and bite me when I'm not looking, will it?" "You be fine," the Twi'lek assured him. Gorvich crossed his arms and stared at Tethys, his eyes staying above the neck for a change. "I know you're keeping something from me, Sunshine, but I'll let it slide since you set this whole deal up." "Still owe us our cut," she reminded him. "Don't worry, I got the credits stashed away somewhere safe," Gorvich laughed, a mean, spiteful sound. "Guess we aren't going to get those bonus credits your friend promised, though." "Might still make it off Reaver Station," Tethys said, a little more defensively than she'd intended. "I'm just going to assume he's not coming back," Gorvich said. "Good thing we took this shuttle for collateral. Already got a couple of buyers lined up." Seeing Tethys scowl, he added, "Hey, I didn't think any of you was going to make it back." "Why you sent us with them? Want to keep all the credits for yourself?" "Water under the bridge, Sunshine," he said with an indifferent shrug. "Now that you're back, I'm happy to share." "Can't sell shuttle," she told him, already tiring of the conversation. "Need it to deliver message." "Whoa, hold on a second. What are you talking about? You think I'm going to just let you take off in my collateral?" Gorvich's eyes narrowed. "How do I know you and your friends aren't trying to pull a fast one? You say they're still on Reaver Station, but for all I know, you dropped them off at some luxury resort. Then they send you back here to get the Prosperity so you can all meet up later and get out of paying me the rest of the credits I was promised." "Idiot," Tethys said with a shake of her head, turning away from him and heading toward the shuttle. "One more step and I ventilate your pretty little skull, Sunshine." She turned around slowly to see Gorvich had drawn his blaster and was pointing it right at her. "Saved your life on Narshada," she hissed. "That's why I didn't shoot you in the back," he admitted. "But I don't like being played, so stop holding out and tell me what's really going on." Tethys bit her lip, trying to find a way to talk herself out of this without having to cut Gorvich in on her side deal. In the end, she couldn't do it. Theron offered 10,000 credits to deliver a message to Coruscant. Gotta take fancy shuttle to get there in time. 10,000 credits, huh? Gorvich lowered his blaster, though he didn't put it away. "Cut you in for 3, Tethys said. "Hold on a second, Sunshine," holding up his free hand. "You really believe you're going to get 10,000 credits just to deliver a message to Coruscant? You're dreaming." "Deal's good," she insisted, not wanting to get into the details. "You don't think Coruscant Customs has access to the Prosperity's records? They'll toss you in jail for theft the second you touch down." Tethys hadn't considered that, Hopefully, she'd be able to convince the authorities that she really did have an urgent message for Grandmaster Satil Shan. Ha! Didn't think of that, did you? Gorvich gloated, recognizing the reason for her silence. See, that's why you need me around watching out for you. Worth the risk, Tethys argued. 10,000 credits, too good to pass up. If he pays you. He already owes us another 20 on credit. And remember how he renegotiated the original deal? He says 10 now, but when it comes time to pay, who knows how much he'll actually be willing to fork over. Maybe 0. Won't be 0, Tethys grumbled. Even if he comes through with the 10 he promised and the 20 he already owes us, I've got a better deal for you, Gorvich said. Forget about the message. We sell the prosperity and split the profit. We both come out way ahead in that game. Tethys wasn't surprised by Gorvich's plan. He was a despicable man with no honor, but he knew how to turn a profit. And everything he'd said about Theron was true. Theron had reneged on the original deal. And even if she delivered the message and he didn't double-cross her, there was a good chance whatever crazy plan he was trying to pull off wouldn't work. If he was killed or captured by the Sith, she could kiss her credits goodbye. Well, Sunshine, what's it going to be? How much we get for the shuttle? 50,000 easy. Plus I've still got your cut of the 30 I stashed away. If she tried to help Theron, Gorvich might just shoot her where she stood. Even if she tricked or overpowered him, her days with the old Tyon Brotherhood would be over, and there was a good chance she might not get paid anyway. Or she could abandon Theron, keep working with Gorvich, and continue climbing the ranks of the Brotherhood while taking an easy 40,000 credits. Good money, Sunshine, Gorvich prodded, enough to ease any guilt about betraying a friend. And how long till you betray us? Tethys sprang into action, hoping to catch Gorvich off guard as he waited for her answer. He was standing 3 steps away from her, his gun still pointed casually at the ground. Her first step was free. On her second, his eyes went wide with the realization of what was happening. On the third, he was bringing the gun up, but he only got it halfway before she knocked it out of his hand with a spinning back kick. She followed it up with a jumping front kick, swinging her foot as hard as she could and catching him right between the legs. Gorvich collapsed on the ground, curled up in the fetal position, groaning softly. Tethys scooped up his fallen pistol, pointed it at him, then decided not to pull the trigger. Instead, she tucked it into her belt and raced over to the shuttle. She punched in the access code and the Prosperity's boarding ramp descended with a soft hiss from the pressurized cabin. She ran up it, turning to glance back at Gorvich. He was still on the floor, but he was crawling toward the ship. He met her eye with a hate-filled gaze. Something in that look made Tethys realize he wasn't done yet. Reacting on pure instinct, she threw herself back and to the side, grabbing one of the boarding ramp struts to keep from falling off. At the same time, Gorvich's hand flickered, dropping to the sharpened blade he kept strapped to his thigh and hurling it in her direction with a single well-practiced motion almost too quick for the eye to follow. The blade buried itself deep in Tethys' shoulder, almost knocking her off the boarding ramp. Using the strut for leverage, she hauled herself into the ship and hit the button to close the boarding ramp behind her. Acutely aware that if she hadn't tried to get out of the way, the blade, now protruding from her shoulder, would have buried itself deep in her back. Ignoring her injury, she rushed to the cockpit, fired up the engine, sent the signal to open the hangar doors, and took to the air. Back on the ground, Gorvich crawled over to the control panel and hauled himself up, slamming the button to close the hangar doors with his fist. Tethys saw the hangar doors stop at halfway open, then slowly start to close again. She gritted her teeth, yanking back hard on the control stick to send the ship hurtling forward and braced for impact. The Prosperity's hull, like everything else about the vessel, was top of the line. The multiple layers of durasteel plating and the reinforced frame struck the hangar doors and wrenched them off their hinges, sending them flying as the thrusters powered the ship on through and up into the sky. Climbing toward the upper atmosphere, Tethys felt a subtle shimmy in the shuttle's formerly velvet-smooth ride, but checking the ship's instrument panel showed no significant damage. A few minutes later, she was far enough away from the planet's gravitational field to engage the hyperspace drive and activated the advanced autopilot to take her to Coruscant. Only then did she tend to her wounded shoulder. Digging out the medkit from beneath the pilot's seat, she inspected the blade, making sure she wouldn't bleed out if she pulled it free. Fortunately, it had struck muscle and bone rather than a major artery, and she was able to remove it without any real difficulty, though doing so made her tilt her head back and scream. Blocking out the pain, she treated and dressed the wound with the efficiency of one all too familiar with administering back alley medicine. She inspected her work one final time before taking a pair of colto-filled hypodermics and jabbing them into her thigh. The pain disappeared almost instantly, and she felt a pleasant warmth spreading through her. She shifted in her seat, and the chair responded by automatically adjusting itself to her new position, enveloping her in luxurious comfort. She turned her head to the side and saw Nagani Zhou once again sitting in the seat beside her. "I'm proud of you, my girl, for sparing Gorvich and for making the right choice." "Now maybe stupid Jedi leave us alone," she murmured, her words trailing off into a soft snore. Okay, changing direction again. "I have the latest casualty estimates for tomorrow's attack on Duro," the director said. "Do you really think I want to see them?" Jace asked. The Supreme Commander was slumped in the chair behind his desk, his hands clutching an empty glass. He leaned forward and grabbed the long neck of the half-full bottle in front of him and refilled his drink for what Marcus guessed wasn't the first time this evening. "The extra patrols you're sending help. Not much, but a little." "We save a few hundred," Jace grunted bitterly, "but we still sacrifice thousands. We could try to come up with an excuse to have an actual fleet orbiting the planet," the director suggested. "Make up some honor to give it to get oh, make up some honor to give to one of Duro's citizens. Have the ships there as part of the celebration." "Imagine you're the Imperial Minister of Logistics," Jace said, his words clear despite the alcohol he'd consumed. "What would you think if you found a ceremonial fleet stationed at Duro when you launched your surprise attack? Would you believe it was just coincidence?" The director sighed. "No, I'd think the cipher codes had been compromised." Jace raised his drink in a silent toast to his honesty, then downed it in a single gulp. "Grab yourself a glass," he said, nodding over to the bar in the corner as he refilled his own. The director did just that before sitting in one of the chairs on the opposite side of the Supreme Commander's desk. Jace held the bottle up, and Marcus extended his glass. "You think Theron's going to follow through on the mission?" Jace asked as he poured. Marcus drained half his drink before answering. "He's my best agent." "You used to say he was one of the best," Jace noted. "I upgraded him after he brought back the Black Cipher." "What about Nosteral? He's a Jedi." Jace emptied his glass again. "They're not always great at following orders that don't fit their understanding of the universe." "I think he's smart enough to understand why he had to do this, and aborting the mission doesn't help Duro." "So you think they'll go forward?" "I think so. They both care too much about the Republic to let this go off the rails." "And after this is over, after we bring down the spear and finally put an end to this blasted war, you think Theron will ever forgive me?" The director didn't answer. Instead, he just drained what was left of his drink. "Do you support my decision?" Jace wanted to know. "I do," Marcus said. "It's the right call. Don't know if I could have made it, though, and I don't know how either of us is supposed to live with it." Jace grabbed the bottle and refilled their glasses. "Making a decision like this is brutal," the Supreme Commander agreed, "but living with it is worse." And that is the end of Chapter 25. So, that's where I will leave off tonight, and hopefully, like I said earlier, I will be able to actually stick on schedule and not skip 2 weeks again. So yeah, let's go on over and raid somebody. I don't normally raid on Mondays, but I'm going to tonight. I'm feeling good about it. So I see Mr. Blitzer's on, and I have not raided him in a while. So we'll go on over there and see what he's up to. So bear with me a couple of minutes. Say hi if you feel like it, and I'll get us on over there. See you in a minute.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over now. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me